Hello and welcome to another edition of Pittsburgh Sports Memories podcast. I'm your host, Steve Wirt, and as usual, I'm with.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tim Hannon.
And today we're going to be going back and covering a season that's not too long ago, so it's pretty fresh in our memories, and it's the 2016 Pitt football season. So where were you in 2016? Doing something else, I guess.
Yeah. It's weird to even think that was even 4 years ago because it seems like it's not that long ago.
Yeah. And so we've kind of titled this. I went with a different theme. Normally we do chronologically, but I decided to go a little different because it's kind of a different kind of season. So I kind of summed this season up into three different categories, and I will call it the good, the bad, and the ugly. And this is obviously a play on the famous Clint Eastwood movie starring him, Liam Van Cleef, and Eli Wallach. So just to kind of, before we jump right into the ugly, which will be the first, we'll do the backstory. How did we get here in 2016? So the coach pre-2016 was Paul Chryst. He kind of rebuilt the program back to some level of at least respectability. Their defense had not been good. He was more of an offensive coach, so he definitely rebuilt the offense. After 2015, Chryst leaves for Wisconsin. It's his alma mater. It's where he's from. It's like where he has a very deep connection to. I think his family's there, and he played there. It's almost like a Johnny Majors to Tennessee move. It's the only school that he would ever leave Pitt for. And, of course, he did this without the Johnny Majors of bringing a national championship to Pitt. I think he finished 500. I think Paul Chryst finished 500. So Pitt's looking for a coach, and they've had a lot of coaches in the last, 6 to 8 years. So they're kind of tired of hiring people. So they go out and they get a guy named Pat Narduzzi. And Pat Narduzzi's from Youngstown, so he's kind of a Western Pennsylvania guy. And he's been a defensive coordinator at Michigan State under Mark D'Antoni. He was with D'Antoni, I think, in Cincinnati and a couple other stops along the way. This is his first head coaching job. He's a defensive coordinator, so they want him to rebuild the defense. But I think more importantly is what Pitt is looking for is they want stability. They don't want to be hiring someone in 4 years because he wants to go back to Michigan State. He's kind of from Pittsburgh, Youngstown, so he has some roots in this area, and he's had some success, at college football, and he's kind of a young and up and coming. So Narduzzi's first season in 2015, the team goes 6-6. They kind of they beat the teams they lost to the teams that were good. It's kind of a weird season that way. I mean, because normally Pitt has like a head-scratching loss, head-scratching win. They really didn't have either of those in that season. They just kind of like, oh, okay, this team's better. They lost. This team's better than them. They won. I mean, Navy might be the only one that's kind of close, but I didn't think Pitt was all that great that year, and Navy was pretty good, and that was Navy's bowl game, which was played in Annapolis, was basically an extra home game for Navy.
The only thing I remember about that game was that the Naval Academy wore these really cool uniforms. They had like helmets.
They had the battleships on the helmets.
Yeah, with the battleship on the helmet. And when it was like 21-0 Navy, that was the only cool thing about that game.
Well, I mean, I actually attended that bowl game, and
Did you?
Started off. Yeah, we went to Annapolis, which is a beautiful town. Yeah, and we returned the opening kick for a touchdown, Henderson.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, Quadri Henderson.
Yes.
And that was it. It was all downhill from there.
Okay. That would have been a cool place to visit, I imagine, just to be.
We
in
never,
Annapolis.
we kind of left. I don't know why. I guess we never did make it to like you really should go to the Naval Museum. I suppose that's pretty cool, but we never made it there.
Maybe next military bowl.
Yeah. Other things that happened was Jim Chaney, who was the offensive coordinator for Pitt. He left after 1 year. He wanted that sweet SEC money at Georgia, so he's gone to the SEC. So they have a vacancy on their coaching staff. And Narduzzi knows this guy. He had coached against him, I think, in like the good old MAC days. Matt Canada. Canada is a career assistant coach, but he's become like this offensive guru. And he's been at NC State for a couple seasons, and they've always had like a really decent offense, decent to good offense. But for some reason, Canada has a falling out with the NC State head coach Dave Doran, and he's let go. So this guy's available, and Pitt picks him up. To their credit, Josh Conklin is the defensive coordinator for Pitt. He's in his second year as defensive coordinator. He's kind of a young guy, another young guy. He kind of has these young up-and-coming assistants. That's kind of way Narduzzi's going. On the player front, James Conner had injured his knee the year before against Youngstown State. And then while he was rehabbing, he was, of course, diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. It was a devastating diagnosis. I remember telling my parents, and they were very upset at the time. But it ends up being like this motivational thing for him. In learning of this diagnosis, his quote was, "Fear is a choice, and I choose not to fear cancer." He said that in his press conference. And on May 23rd of 2016, so that was like the fall of 2015, he is declared cancer-free by the doctors. And here they have like video of like Conner like practicing with the team in the spring, and yeah, it was pretty emotional time there. And it was big, like, I think it brought the team together and gave them kind of like, some resiliency, and he was a good team leader for that.
Yeah, it was really cool, and it was like a national story. He was on like the Ellen DeGeneres show and stuff like that. It was a big deal, national news, and very inspirational.
Yeah. Now the quarterback was Nathan Peterman. He had replaced Chad Wojtek, who really wasn't that good. But Peterman that one year was kind of mediocre. He kind of got run out of Tennessee because people didn't think he was that good. So he's kind of like a mediocre. He's at least a quarterback, which I never thought Chad Wojtek was like on that level. So, like I said, we're gonna do the good, the bad, and the ugly theme here. So we'll start off with the ugly, which was the character's name was Tuco and is played by an actor named Eli Wallach. Eli Wallach, he was a great actor. He'd done a lot of roles, but he never won an Academy Award. They did give him an honorary run in November of 2010.
Should he have won one for the good, bad, and the ugly?
He was pretty good in that. I don't know who the other nominees were in 1968 or whatever that was, but he was pretty good in that. I mean, all three of them were pretty good.
Oh yeah, they were brilliant. Yeah. So before the show, I expressed to Steve, much to his utter disgust, the fact that I've never seen this movie, The Good, Bad, and the Ugly. I've heard of it. I'm familiar with the phrase, but I've never seen it.
It's what they call spaghetti western because it was filmed in Italy and made by an Italian director. And it's part of like three other movies they call the Dollars trilogy, and it's all starring Clint Eastwood, who's the man with no name, but he actually has a name in this part of the trilogy.
Can't go wrong with Clint Eastwood in a western.
No. This is before Clint Eastwood decided to do his crotchety old man roles. So we'll go over Clint Eastwood when we get to the good.
Okay.
So the ugly, this is the really bad parts of the season. So we'll just get that out of the way in this podcast, get the misery out here. So Pitt loses to Miami. Hey, what a shocker. Woohoo. Pitt always loses to Miami, and it was 51-28. Miami kind of shut down the running game in the second half. Conner only had 40 yards rushing. Peterman only had two passing touchdowns, but he also had an interception. Once again, Quadri Henderson did have a kick return for a touchdown. He was really good at returning kicks for touchdowns outside of, what's his name for the Bears? White. Or was it White? No.
Devin Hester?
Devin Hester, that's it. Yeah.
Didn't the Steelers sign him as a kick returner?
I think when he was like way over the hill.
No. Quadri Henderson.
Oh, yeah, he's been on and off the team. They've cut him a couple. Like, I always feel bad because like he in other years, if he would have came in the league 10 years ago, he would be on a team somewhere just because he's really good at returning kicks. But nobody returns kicks anymore, and he's okay at returning punts, but he makes sometimes questionable decisions returning punts. kickoffs were really his specialty there.
And like you said, they all go over. In the
Yeah,
end zone
well,
now.
they wanted to get rid of kickoffs. I think that if they could just start the ball at the 25, they would. So, yeah, they kind of moved the ball up and, got rid of all that. The worst part of the Miami game was the defense. They gave up 4 passing touchdowns and 356 yards passing to Brad Kaya, who's not exactly Vinny Testaverde or Jim Kelly or I don't know.
Gino Toretta.
The other guy that won a national championship at Miami, the guy from Philly, that guy too. There's 4 to 10 other Miami quarterbacks that are way better than this guy.
Ken Dorsey?
Well, Ken Dorsey was definitely way better.
Okay.
But there was a guy in the 90s. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, I've already exhausted my list of Miami quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Anyway, this guy
Right.
was not them.
No, he was not them, and he wasn't probably even in the conversation as them. This 23-point loss was the largest of the season. Pitt never beats Miami. They've only beat Miami 3 times in the last 24 years. So they got that going for them. The next really bad loss, this is ugly too. I think it's more the opponent. Like the Miami loss wasn't as shocking because Pitt always loses to Miami, especially that game was in Hard Rock Stadium or whatever it's called this week. So on October 27th, Virginia Tech 39, Pitt 36. I went to this game. Pitt's offense had their worst, I would say, first half of the season, especially first quarter. They really didn't get off that a strong start. So they kind of fell behind Virginia Tech. And but they ended up scoring 36 points, and they had a strong second half. Connor had 141 rush yards and 3 touchdowns. Peter in the passing game were mediocre to bad. 267 yards passing. He had a TD and interception, really isn't good. But really, the story of the game was the defense because literally the quarterback for Virginia Tech was Gerard Evans, who's, once again, not Michael Vick, Jim Druckenmiller. Name your list of Virginia Tech quarterbacks who are way better than this guy. And literally, they ran the same play the whole game. It was just fade pass, fade pass, fade pass. Can you stop a fade pass? It's 3rd and 9. Here comes the fade pass. So Pitt just could not. I remember even after the game, Narduzzi was yeah, we didn't pass our fade pass test or something. It was some sarcastic remark. So the receivers for Virginia Tech really weren't all that fast. They were just very tall. So they had that going for them. Brian O'Neill, he scored a rushing touchdown this game, and that was kind of became a theme later in the season. But it was kind of weird because he was a tight end that became a tackle, and I think does he play for the Vikings? I think he's in the NFL somewhere as a tackle. But he an offensive lineman scoring touchdowns where that's the play, that's the actual play call. They called it on a sweep. So it's kind of odd, but it was entertaining to watch a fat guy touchdown. As of this broadcast, as far as I can tell, that's the only time Virginia Tech has won at Heinz Field. Because Pitt normally owns them pretty well. So
Yeah, and they had that lull where they didn't play each other for about 10 years, and then they both got into the ACC. And then the Pitt kind of picked up right where they had left off, and beating them every year. And then that hurt to lose to them at home.
Yeah, and especially it was just the same play over and over and over again. So that's again, there's a theme developing here about the defense, especially the passing defense. So on September 24th, this is early in the season. This one hurts.
I was just talking about this game literally a week ago whenever the Bears benched Mitchell Trubisky.
Well, here you go. 36-37. Pitt loses to North Carolina. There's 3 things that are guaranteed in life: death, taxes, and Pitt losing to North Carolina in football. This is, like I said, this is a game that helped quarterback Mitchell Trubisky get drafted ahead of Patrick Mahomes. You're welcome, Bears fans. I'm sure they're really happy about that. Good for Mitchell Trubisky. Made a bunch of money. the defense couldn't stop North Carolina. Like they literally had like 4 fourth downs and they converted every one of them. Was the game-winning touchdown on the fourth down? I can't even remember.
No, so there was.
But on that drive they like they had like 4th and 4, 4th and 5, and they just kept getting them.
So yeah, they're down. They're down. They have to score a touchdown on their last drive, and Pitt literally at least twice, maybe 3 times, has them down to 4th down. And they just converted every time. And then the game-winning touchdown was scored with 2 seconds left.
Yeah.
On a like a corner of the end zone.
And the guy wasn't even that hard of a catch, if I remember correctly. Like he was kind of open, like by a fair amount, not wide open, but open enough where like if he would have dropped it, you would have remembered it. Yeah. It's Mitchell Trubisky finished with 453 yards passing. Take that, Patrick Mahomes. And 5 touchdowns. Ryan Switzer also had a big day. Another Steeler, soon-to-be Steeler. He had 16 receptions and 203 yards. So, Steeler fans, you can thank Pitt for Ryan Switzer too, I guess.
Yeah, Ryan Switzer. So Trubisky, you're right. When he was drafted, because the Bears traded up to get him, which everybody was like, "What in the world?" They traded from 3 to 2, which they didn't need to do. Nobody wanted him at that spot. They passed on Mahomes.
Well, they still could have drafted at 3 Mahomes.
Yeah. Or they could have drafted Trubisky at 3 because nobody wanted him there. They passed on Mahomes. They passed on Watson, and everybody was shocked. And I remember like that's all they. Well, who is Mitchell Trubisky? And then it's like Watson, Burn, Pitt, and then Ryan Switzer's another guy that the Steelers finally let him go, in 2020, and for years I was so like. Let's throw a screen pass to Ryan Switzer, and let's have Ryan Switzer return the punt sideways for 1 yard. I mean, he was another guy that I just was like, why do we keep having Ryan Switzer? And you're right. I feel like this game made both of them.
Well, you can think, they probably owe like checks to like Pat Narduzzi or like Avonte Maddox and Ryan Lewis, other members of the Pitt secondary.
And I was so disgusted after that game. I just remember being like, you know what? This is what a classic Pitt loss.
And that was in North Carolina.
It was, yeah.
On a positive note, Quadri Ollison, the running back, had 107 yards rushing on 9 carries. So, I mean, they kind of have, they have like this group of running backs. We'll get more into that later. I think they don't get as much hype as they should. Sticking with the really ugly parts of the season, overall, the Pitt defense was awful beginning to end. They never really improved. They gave up a ton of points to like the better quarterbacks I can see, they're good quarterbacks, but this was kind of the opposite. Like, at least the year before, they seemed to be able to stand up to mediocre quarterbacks. This year was like, it was horrible. And Narduzzi or Conklin couldn't really adjust, or maybe they just didn't have the players. They were still using Christ's players at that point. That was only Narduzzi's second year, so really hadn't had his recruits yet. So another fun fact, me and a friend at work started calling Avonte Maddox the one-pick corner of Avonte Sadix. So you're welcome, Eagles fans. He's their problem now. There was a playoff game I remember watching it. I remember he got burned. I think that was against Russell Wilson. I think that was Seattle, yeah. Yeah, and it was like, what a shock. Avonte Maddox getting burned. I've seen that one before. So that's enough that was the really ugly part. So now we're getting a little better. This is just the bad. It isn't good. It was bad, but it wasn't as bad as that stuff. And the bad was played by a gentleman named Lee Van Cleef. His character's name was Angel Eyes. And this is probably my favorite bad guy actor outside of Alan Rickman. Alan Rickman, Hans Gruber, Snape,
Oh, yeah.
But
the sheriff from Robin Hood.
Yeah. But Lee Van Cleef is just awesome as a bad guy, and he's the bad guy. The plot of not to get too much into the good, bad, and the ugly, but they're trying to find this lost gold, and Tuco knows part of the mystery to find it, and the good guy Clint Eastwood does too. So Lee Van Cleef basically tortures Tuco for an hour. It's unbelievable. Not graphic like Quentin Tarantino. They just kind of beat the crap out of him in a chair. But that's Lee Van Cleef. He's a bad guy. And then he turns on his whole gang. So he's a bad guy. So starting with the bad, the Pinstripe Bowl. It's a bowl game in Yankee Stadium. It's played a month after the season, so Pitt's season is over. I mean, everything that Pitt had done up to this point was kind of like way better than this bowl game. And it was kind of like, I mean, okay, I'm going to drive to New York, sit in the freezing cold Yankee Stadium and watch Pitt play Northwestern, who isn't even remotely like a rival at all or anybody that, like, nothing against Northwestern, but, I'm sure Northwestern felt the same way. And it did, Pitt played a bad game. James Conner got hurt. Peterman got hurt, didn't finish the game. It just was an unnecessary game. They had to play it because it's the bowl game, and I guess, it's your reward. Pitt had, like I said, already won all the big games that were way bigger than this. It was just such an afterthought, and, like, who cares? I just remember the whole time, and it was like, I don't care about this bowl game. I could really care if they won or lost, or it just didn't matter. So that's kind of the fans. I don't know what the team's attitude was, but that was my attitude. So
Yeah.
And they lost. So
Agreed.
Another bad moment was September 17th. Pitt 38, Oklahoma State 45. Connor had 111 yards rushing, and so does Quadri Henderson, the receiver. He had 95 yards rushing. The defense is terrible. They give up 540 yards passing and 2 TDs. And it's once again the future Steelers. Mason Rudolph has a good game, but not as good as the game he would have next year. And James Washington has a great day with 269 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns. The one thing, the most I remember about this game was, besides it was kind of getting, like, by that point in the season, you kind of got a feel for Pitt. Like, you knew it was going to be a lot of high scoring back and forth. But, like, I think it was in the fourth quarter or late in the third quarter, there was a lightning delay because it's like they're in Stillwater, Oklahoma. And, like, because it's Pitt, it's just like, I don't know if they televised the game in Stillwater, but they did sure as heck didn't televise it here. Like, you literally, to this day, I've never seen the end of this game. I could not tell you how it ended, except for that I know somebody scored a late touchdown because you had to read it was like 1920s, like following Pitt football. Oh, let's see what them old Panthers do. Let's open the paper and read about it. It's just.
Is there like a newsboy on the corner?
Yeah.
Extra, extra.
Read all about it.
Pitt
Pitt loses
again.
Defense stinks.
Do you remember, that was really weird. I remember the lightning delay, and I remember checking my phone because, like you said, you couldn't watch it after the lightning delay. Do you remember what happened to Oklahoma State the week before that? That was the game where they lost to Central Michigan on the Hail Mary.
Antonio Brown. Was that the Antonio Brown Hail Mary? Or
No, it was a Hail Mary. Antonio Brown was
no, that's right. He was gone.
Long gone.
That was the game where they threw the ball out of bounds. They
Yes.
called intentional grounding,
Yes.
even though really the receiver's like right there. It's like,
well, and
if you're going to call intentional grounding every time somebody throws a pass over somebody's head, you're going to have a busy day as a referee.
so Oklahoma State, there was like 2 seconds left, they couldn't take a knee. It was fourth down.
Oh, it was fourth down.
So the quarterback just drops back, waits for a clock to tick to 0, and just throws it out of bounds. And the referee said, well, that's intentional grounding. There's one untimed down for Central Michigan. That was actually the wrong call. That intentional grounding is a loss of down. It does not precipitate an untimed down. So they messed that up. They actually gave Central Michigan a down where they didn't deserve it.
Play, yeah.
And then they threw a Hail Mary that they caught on like the 5-yard line. But then the guy like scampered around and somehow got into the end zone.
Yeah.
It was like this miracle win. And I remember I saw the end of that game and I was like, oh no, we have to play Oklahoma State next week. Like, they're not going to lose 2 games in a row at home under these conditions.
Yeah. And I just don't even know what that was. Yeah, bad officiating. It's Oklahoma State. Jeff Van Gundy was a man. He can take it. He's 40 years old, but
He is a man.
Officiating. You can complain about that. Well, I didn't realize it was an actual rules interpretation error.
Right, and that's why they lost. And then they play Pitt.
But I mean, it shouldn't have been intentional grounding anyway, because like you could see there's a receiver down the field. I think so. It was just a bad call anyway. But we'll save that for the Oklahoma State podcast we did. But I'll see how many downloads we get in Stillwater. But November 26th, and this is probably I've gone to, I had season tickets for 10 to 12 years. I've gone to a lot of Pitt football games. I've gone to a fair amount of football games in general between youth and high school, and this is the oddest game I've ever witnessed in my life. I've never seen anything like it. It literally made me hate football. It was that bad. Maybe we should have put this in the ugly, but I didn't think it was ugly. I mean, Pitt does win, but it was just so weird. So on November 26th, it's the last game of the season, and Syracuse is, according to the AC, our de facto rivalry game. So it's kind of a rivalry. It is, but Pitt wins this. It's just so odd. It's like Syracuse decided, like, I think halfway through the game that they had no answer for our offense. They couldn't stop our offense. So Dino Babers, the coach, I think made a calculated decision. What he did was he just literally put everybody on his defense in the middle of the field. And it's like, if you're going to score in one play, that's fine. You only take like 10 seconds off the clock because then I can get my offense back. And his offense was scoring. As you'll see, the final score was 76. Pitt had to score 76 points to win. To 61. They gave up 61 points.
And still won.
Yeah, and still won. And it was literally every Pitt drive was just like one play drives. Like, because like I remember like 2 or 3 times like they would run the little jet sweep and Syracuse just wouldn't cover it. They're like, fine. They're just like literally just like stand there and like either try and go for the strip or just like, oh, the guy's by us. Oh, okay, all right, well, score. We'll just get the ball back. It was literally like Jim Boeheim took over coaching Syracuse. It was like, we're just going to play basketball. You know, it's horrible. It wasn't football. It wasn't football. It was a travesty of football. It was, and Pitt won, and I can't remember. I just remember being so annoyed with this game.
And this was regulation, right? This wasn't like
it didn't go to overtime.
Yeah, some college games it goes into like 6 overtimes, and you see these weird.
No,
scores.
this happened in four quarters
Wow.
of regulation play.
Yeah.
I didn't pull up the box score, but I mean, it's like I said. Like I think really the strategy by Syracuse was as long as they don't take 5 minutes off the clock and score a touchdown, we're okay. Even if they score a touchdown, if they only do it like in a minute or less, you know. And that was kind of their whole defensive game plan. Another bad part was WVU ended up playing in a bowl game. They're in the Big 12, and they had a bowl alliance with ACC. So for some reason, they decided to send WVU to the Russell Bowl in Orlando, Florida. Now, why you wouldn't just flip-flop, I don't know if it's the way, like, that bowl game was tied in with the Big 12 and the Pinstripe Bowls with the Big 10. Like, it would have made sense to flip-flop those opponents to, like, you know, okay, West Virginia comes to New York or, you know, however you want to flip-flop it, just those two opponents need to switch. And so, like, you know, Pitt ends up playing, you know, Northwestern, whereas if Pitt would have played WVU, that game I would have cared about.
Oh,
you
yeah,
know?
a lot of people, a lot of fans from both Morgantown and Pittsburgh would have went to that game.
Yeah, even if you would have had it in Orlando still.
Right.
I mean, especially if you would have had New York, that's an easy drive for both schools. But, I mean, Pitt probably didn't end up doing this because they lost to Miami. And maybe if they beat Miami and finished better, you know, with a better record, then they can get to that bowl in Orlando. But also, the ACC, like on the minor bowls, likes to keep them drivable. Remember, we were talking about the Military Bowl in Annapolis. Well, that's why, like, you know, if you're in a lower tier bowl, like the ACC likes to either send you to like the bowls in North Carolina or the bowls in Maryland or New York, so that like the fans can just drive to it, so that it gets more fans in the stands. Even though it's really TV, but I mean, it is just kind of. And Orlando obviously is more drivable for Miami than, you know, Pitt is. Their schedule was really tough. It was like a throwback to when they were an independent. The worst team they lost to was Northwestern in that meaningless bowl game at 6-6. Oklahoma State finished with a 10-3 record. Their final ranking was 11th. They won the Alamo Bowl over Colorado. North Carolina and Mitchell Trubisky were 8-5, and they weren't ranked, and they lost the Sun Bowl to Stanford. So Mitchell Trubisky still got drafted, though. You know, they didn't hold it against him. Virginia Tech became they were ranked 16th. They were the Coastal Division champ. They lost to Clemson in the championship game. but they beat Arkansas, SEC in the Belk Bowl. So Miami, like I said, they beat WVU in the Russell Bowl in Orlando. Miami finished 9-4, and they were ranked 23rd. So pretty much every team there were two teams they lost to. Although Northwestern, I don't know if that really counts, but North Carolina was definitely the worst regular season loss. So that's enough of the bad. It's time to get to the good stuff, the fun stuff. Let's have some fun here. The good is played by Clint Eastwood, of course. If you're younger and you only remember him from like Gran Torino, there was a time when Clint Eastwood wasn't like a million years old and played old man roles. He was the roles that Clint Eastwood tended to play like when he was in his prime, whereas this character called The Man with No Name, and he's kind of this anti-hero. It was the 60s, and they're big like back in the 50s, I guess it was like Roy Rogers and like, oh, I'm the white hat good guy and I do everything. He's the good guy, but he's kind of the bad guy anti-hero. So it's very 60s. And so he's I don't think has he ever won an Academy Award? Probably for like Bridges of Madison County or something.
He's won
as
a bunch
director.
He's won several.
For like director, I think.
Yeah, Unforgiven and the boxing movie. I think he won a best director for.
But Blondie is the perfect personification of the Pitt team that year. We're the anti-hero. We're not the good guys. We're here to ruin your team's season. Welcome to it. Welcome to Thunderdome. We'll start off with an October 1st win against Marshall. Pitt 43, Marshall 27. It was a good comeback win. They had lost 2 games in a row before that game, and both in the fourth quarter. And that was after the really tough last-minute loss, like we said, on the last play game in North Carolina. At that point, the Pitt defense was the second to worst ranked pass defense in NCAA FBS. So, like, what are there, 124 teams? So they were, like 123. So you can't do – well, you can do a little bit worse than that, but not much. So Pitt's defense would be – but they showed some resilience, and they came back and won, and they really could have, like, gone in the tank at that point. But, that wasn't how this team rolled. They really, showed some toughness there. Definitely had some shortcomings. October 15th, I remember this game, Pitt 45, Virginia 31. It was a close game, and this was in Virginia. It turned on a defensive play. What a shocker. Jordan Whitehead, who plays for Tampa Bay, made an interception before the half. And Connor had a decent rushing game. George Ashton, who's kind of like developed into this fullback, like also like, when they're not using Allison or Henderson, they kind of slip Ashton in there. And he has like a ton of big plays this season. The offense didn't have any turnovers. They obviously scored 45 points. That's pretty good. The defense got a turnover. So it's kind of like the defense isn't great. They give up a lot of points, but if they can get some turnovers here and there, they kind of like can tilt the advantage to Pitt because they're so good on offense. I remember Connor playing defense on this game. I think he actually rushed the quarterback and got a holding call against the tackle. So James Connor's just like really impressive.
He played a lot, not a lot, but he played a decent amount on defense early in his career at Pitt. Nobody will ever remember that. But
he was drafted as a defensive end.
You mean recruited as a
recruited as a defensive end.
Yeah.
So, the next week they play Duke, and I've talked about David Cutcliffe I think before, but he's a class act, and he really is. And when he heard Connor got hurt, he sent him a note, and he said, I wanted to send you a quick note to say all of us here at Duke were saddened to hear about your injury. And then that was like typed out, and then there's like actually a hand. So it isn't like he just like, oh, secretary type. He actually had a handwritten part on it. And he said, you're a great competitor, and we wish you the best of luck with your recovery. Like I said, David Cutcliffe's a class act. He worked under Johnny Majors and Phil Former. He's just, in general, a good coach, good guy. I've never heard anything bad about him. The Duke game, this isn't the good because this is the most complete performance by the Pitt team. This is their best, as far as complete win, this is it. And they held the Duke to 14 points total. Peterman had 3 TDs passing. Connor had 2 TDs rushing. Daniel Jones was their quarterback, so they only held him to a TD passing. So a guy that was ended up being a decent quarterback. I remember also it was snowing, like not like a bad, but like one of those early like season snows. So I think once Duke got down by a couple touchdowns, they were kind of like, "Where's the bus to North Carolina?" So, but a very complete win, and Jester Weah and developed as a wide receiver. Like the passing game really came around in this game. October 8th, Georgia Tech 34, Pitt 37. Georgia Tech at this time was still coached by Paul Johnson, who was a triple option guy. So there's no passing game to worry about. So the defense that worst pass rating defense can't get burnt, right? So they got a little lucky to win this one. They probably earned a little bit of lucky after some of the North Carolina games and others. They ran that. This is where they first trotted out the Brian O'Neill play, where he stood in the backfield, like on the other side of the field as like a tackle, and they threw him the ball backwards, so it was a lateral. So it's not a receiving; it counts as a rushing touchdown, even though it looks like a pass, but I guess you have to throw it laterally for him to be eligible or something. And he was like wide open and ran for like 40 yards or something. I remember seeing, I saw it in person. I still can't believe it happened. I mean,
so it shows on the stat sheet as a tight end had like a 40-yard
rush or something like that. Yeah, it was odd. Late in the game, I remember this too. There was a tipped pass where Scott Orndorff caught it. Like it literally probably should have been at least knocked down, if not intercepted. And it literally tipped in. Scott Orndorff just like ran in the end zone. It was like, yay! And then a curious part of this game was with under 2 minutes to play, and the score was tied, 34-34. Pitt kicks off. And Georgia Tech gets the ball at the 25, and they have a 4th and 1 at their own 34, and Paul Johnson at their own 34. So, like, that's pretty much in field goal range already if you don't get this, or really, So, like, they ran they run their little option, and, like, Tariq Jarrett, the biggest human being I've ever met, and Matt Columbus absolutely stuff him. I remember my dad saying, "Oh, my gosh, that play got stuffed." And, like, you could literally hear, like, it was such a loud clap when they came together. Like, you could hear it. And the best part of this was the ACC officials, God bless them. Like, there's just, like, if you're, like, one of the ACC original teams, you get every break in the world. It's like, literally, they started at the 25. If the ball isn't touching the 35, it's not a first down. You don't need to measure here. It's either touching the 35 or not touching the 35. No, we'll bring the chains out and measure.
It's more dramatic that way.
They were short.
Clint Eastwood would be proud.
Yeah, it's like, what the heck? It's like, I still don't understand. Like, I guess a coach can ask for a measurement. Maybe it was just the oddest thing I've ever seen. It's like, why are you measuring? Like, it's either on the 35 or not. So they had that going for him. But after that, Pitt drives the ball down to the the Georgia Tech 12. And, Chris Blewett had his ups and downs that season, decided he couldn't just, like, kick, like, 12? So it's like, a 20-some yard field goal. Can't just, like, simply kick. Like, it's basically an extra point in the NFL now. Like, you can't just, like, put it through the middle, it's an easy field goal. No, he calls bank. I remember that, like, he hits off the upright and it goes through, thank goodness. And it was, like, literally the most Chris Blewett thing to do ever. And another fun fact, remember the Bears were going to sign him, so that would have driven the Bears fans in. For Bears fans, Pitt just tortures them unnecessarily. But after that, Pitt got lucky. They won 37-34. Connor didn't score in this game, but the offense is coming around as other weapons. Like I said, Jester Weah, Allison had a good game. Orndorff is like becoming like a really good tight end, and Henderson, the receiver, is doing good. I guess we'll have Brian O'Neill's. There's a YouTube video of Brian O'Neill's 2 touchdowns if you really want to see like fat guy touchdowns. So
yeah, we can post that on the website. This was like that era. There were a lot of weird games like this with Georgia Tech. Because remember, I don't think it was a year before. I think it was 2 years before. I think it was when Chris was still there. They had the homecoming game where they fumbled on their first 5
I went to get a hot dog after the 3rd fumble. That was in 1 quarter. I
Yeah,
couldn't
that was-
take it. I couldn't take it no more. And
Yeah.
literally one was Connor was like just running down the
Yeah.
field. It just
It was like a 90-yard run. He
and
fumbled
like
at the
he's going to
one.
score and he's just like he pulls like Deshaun Jackson or who was that? Or like there's a receiver who did that. Like he didn't even celebrate too
He wasn't
early.
celebrating.
No, he just
lost
dropped the
it.
ball.
Yeah.
Just like it's like a stiff breeze like blew it out of his hand or something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
it was-
fumbled. I think they fumbled away.
I think it
the
was
first-
after that play I went upstairs. I said to my dad, I'm out, Dad.
They-
I got to go get a hot dog or
was-
something.
it
I
was-
can't watch any more of this.
It was 28-0 Georgia Tech after the first, like I want to say 10 minutes, because Pitt fumbled away their first 5 possessions, and Georgia Tech scored touchdowns every time. So it was nice to have this win because they just had so much bad luck against them before that. So it was nice they had some good luck, like the Blewett kick bouncing off the post, and,
Yeah,
and Georgia Tech inexplicably going for it on.
Like I
fourth
could
and one
see
at
if it
their
was
own.
in between the 40s. Like I guess that's only 6 more yards, but especially like if they're at midfield, it's like, well,
Yeah,
maybe.
It's happened before. Like
Yeah.
Barry Switzer famously did that when he coached the Cowboys against the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah.
He went for it. It was like his own 29, and they called they blew a whistle or something. They got
They got
stuffed.
stuff
in-
like 3 times.
yeah. But I mean, I guess the idea is that you have a lot of faith in your ability to get a yard, and you don't have a lot of faith in punting it back and putting the game on your defense. So
They do. I will say Georgia Tech, that triple option is like tough to stop under normal circumstances. Normally, if you have like 3 yards or less, it's almost an automatic first down. Like having watched the triple option, especially in college, it's very tough to stop. And, I mean, to Pitt's defense's credit, they made a play there. So, for as much as maligned as the defense is, and especially the passing part of the defense, the running defense, I never could figure out if they were good or not because, like, nobody ran on them. So, like, you could never really make up your mind. It's like, well, are they good just because nobody runs or are they good because they can stop the run? So, I don't know. That was kind of another thing weird that happened during the season. September 3rd against Villanova. This is the first game of the season. Normally, the Young Stout Day games, you only talk about them if they lose them. These FBS teams like, Delaware or, who cares, But this was probably one of the biggest games that I've ever gone to at Pitt, just because Connor had come back from cancer.
right.
And on that first drive when he drove down, that's another great thing you can look up on YouTube is like Connor just totally mauls the defensive back. I mean, it's an FBS guy, but he just totally mauls him while he goes in the end zone, scores a touchdown. That was one of the biggest moments of the season, and like you said, it made the national news. Like when and it was all the highlights of that game. They really Pitt didn't do much that game. Like it was kind of boring because they ended up scoring 28 points. But I remember this game was like very close for a long time because like they were very vanilla on offense. It was like a lot of Connor up the middle, Connor maybe this side. They really didn't want to show anything on offense because they would have to play Penn State the next week, and they didn't want to give the coaches from Penn State anything to scout or anything like that. So that was kind of why that game was as close. But it still was like that. I could still remember that very clearly, Connor scoring, and it was a very emotional moment at the stadium and and for Pitt in general. So we'll go on to the next 2 games are really like Pitt's season here. These are the pièces résistance for our fans in France. Yeah, this is the top of the heap, the best games that happened that year. This is really Pitt's season in a nutshell. September 10th, Penn State 39, Pitt 42. Some background about this game. That this is the first game Pitt had played Penn State since 2000. Pitt had won 12-0. That was Joe Paterno's last game that he ever coached against Pitt. And the reason that was his last game is because Joe Paterno decided it was going to be that way. So that is no one's fault but Joe. So take it to your grave. 409 and 12-0. He wasn't 410 because you lost. Anywho, moving on. James Franklin on he made some statements before the game, and I guess I'll say the statements first, and I'll try and balance. I think I understand what he was trying to do, but it didn't work. I think he said on whether the Pitt game is a rivalry game. He said, I think obviously being in the same state in the past history of the game is really going to put a major emphasis on it. To me, a rivalry, there's no doubt that it's there from a history perspective. There's elements there from a historical perspective, but our players haven't done that. We approach this like every other game on our schedule. Our guys are excited about it, but I think everybody understands the significance of that. And on 9/6/16 before the game, Trace McSorley said in a press conference call that, no, I'm not saying it's a rivalry. I think what he was trying to do was, in case they did lose or win the game, he didn't want them to like get so high or low that they would lose the next week, which I think they did anyway to Michigan. So that didn't really work out, but it ended up like really firing up the Pitt team, because there's always this perceived that Penn State looks down their nose at Pitt for no good reason, and this kind of played into that perception that Pitt has of Penn State.
Yeah, and that had been going on for years. You mentioned how Paterno, for years, they basically, Penn State was responsible for the rivalry ending, and then for years after that, it was always like poo-pooed at Penn State.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget Tim Curley when they announced the series, and this was years before that. This was like maybe 2010, where they said, hey, in 2016, the Pitt and Penn State are going to have a 4-game series against each other, and they had Tim Curley on Pittsburgh radio. Tim Curley was the AD of Penn State at the time, and they were like, oh, this must be great, getting the rivalry back together, and Tim Curley did everything he could to downplay it. He was like, well, I mean, we had a hole in the schedule. We had to fill it with somebody. And this school, where's this place again? Pittsburgh? Anyway, it just seemed like a school that was willing to play us, so we just said, okay, I guess we'll put them on our schedule. I mean, it was such an insulting, and of course, Tim Curley is in jail now because the arrogance that he and so many at that school carried with them came back to bite them.
Well, I think too, like, I remember Joe Paterno when he was there saying, oh, it's important that we play an in-state rival. That's why we play Temple. Yeah. And it's like, really? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So they just do a lot of stuff like that. And there's another quote I'll hit after the game by Franklin that I think totally reveals that Franklin was it was coach speak. I mean, I don't want to say it's lying, but he cares more about this game than he's letting on. Mm-hmm. So,
yes.
We'll show that later. Narduzzi kept his players away from the media that week, so they were like seething and ready to go. So one thing I will say about Narduzzi is he is like, say what you will about him, and he has his bad losses, but like unlike Chris or like who's that goofball they had for 1 year, Graham.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he understands how to coach at Pitt, because I think because he coached at Michigan State and they were always the little brother. So, and Michigan does the same thing to Michigan State. So, like, Narduzzi understands that so well and how to, like, play that to his advantage.
That's good insight, yeah.
Yeah, and I always thought, that's why I think, like, he really is a good fit for Pitt, and he wants to be here. So, yeah, I know he hasn't won what we wanted him to win, but do we really have to go back to high octane offense? So we're going to go on to the actual on the field stuff. Imagine that. Yeah. So the Pitt-Penn State's a rivalry game, and I don't care how much the people in State College want to, and then they do their little unrivaled, whatever. It's a rivalry game, and you just don't play your rival because you don't want to. But anywho, the game starts off well. Pitt goes on a 90-yard touchdown drive. They were backed up, and like the first play out of the gate, like Connor goes for like 15 yards and just like mauls like the Penn State defense. And it's capped off. The George Ashton, who's the fullback, they kind of like sneak him around the edge, and he scores a pretty easy touchdown. And I mean, it was right down the field. Later on, they have another drive where they drive down and they pass to a wide open Henderson, the wide receiver, and Peterman throws a nice pass to Orndorff, who was pretty well covered. So I just remember in all the games like against big time opponents, I was in shock like that first half, because I couldn't believe like Pitt was scoring was such like it was like nothing to it. This was like watching like Alabama or like USC or like one of the big schools. You know, it was like my goodness, Pitt normally doesn't do this to people. So and also the defense made an early play. They forced a fumble, and that resulted in a touchdown. But not to Penn State's credit, they kind of like recovered from that initial shock of like Pitt scoring a bunch of points. They had a big punt return that got them back into, and Saquon Barkley scored from the Pitt, scored for Penn State. He actually scored twice in the first half, and Pitt went into the half leading 28-14. Pitt scoring 28 points on a for real. This isn't like Villanova or Delaware or even like NC State. This is like a for real rival big time team.
It was at State College too, wasn't it?
No, that was here. I was at this
Hansfield.
game.
Okay,
Yes,
it was at
I was attending this. I was in attendance for this game. So now in the second half, it kind of turns, like the momentum shifts. Penn State comes out firing on offense, and they narrowed the game to a 1 touchdown lead. James Conner scored on a touchdown, short TD run on I think the next drive or the drive after. But actually, it was Darren Hall, who would go on to prominence a couple years later. I forget about it. He was on this thing. The running backs are unbelievable on this team.
They had a lot of. They had a good.
Paul Chryst could recruit a running back.
Yes.
If there's anything he could do, he knew how to find a running back in a running game.
And we really haven't had one since.
Yeah, since Paul Chryst took that all with him to Wisconsin. But Darren Hall had a great run, but it got reversed. Like, it was really close play, but then they scored anyway because James Conner. Yeah, okay, Penn State. You're going to stop James Conner at the 1? Sure you are, buddy. But then disaster did strike. Conner, they're deep in their own end. They give the ball to Conner, and Conner fumbles. And now the defense makes a big play. It's a big play in this game. They hold the Penn State to a field goal. So that's a big play by the defense. It kind of goes under the radar a little bit in this game. Conner then redeems himself by scoring a touchdown on a shovel pass. That pass would become like a staple of the offense this whole season. I think Clemson's still trying to figure out how to stop that. Penn State scores a touchdown and a successful 2-point conversion, so the defense is kind of like they've only really made 2 plays the whole game so far. The fumble and stopping Penn State, they're holding them to a field goal. Now in the next series, Pitt's still up, and they have a chance to get a big 3rd and 4 and to run out the clock, but the Penn State defense stops Conner on a swing pass. Peterman kind of checked it down, and they were ready for it. Now on the next drive, and I'd seen, like you were talking about like 4th down stuff, like this became like a really bad, like, I don't know, I want to say habit or trend, of that defense. They gave up a 4th and 16. And I remember they had done that to somebody like the year before. Like, they gave up like a 4th and 20. Like, how often do you see a team convert a 3rd and 16 or a 3rd and 20? It just doesn't happen that often.
Yeah, that was painful. And you thought, great, we're going to lose on that play.
Yeah, and it was like, part of it was like, I don't think Narduzzi, like, he needed maybe he needs to still progress with this, like, learn how to adjust your defense. Like, his big thing is he wants to, like, get a lot of pressure on the quarterback, and if that leaves your, like, corners in, like, bump and run coverage, like, single, he's going to put his corners out there on an island. Well, I'm sorry, Avonte Maddox, Ryan Lewis, and I don't know who the other corner just weren't up to that task the whole season. So you give up 4th and 16 in a game where, like, if you just literally rush 3 or 4 and tackle them after 5 yards, you get the ball back. So anyway, they convert to have this big play, and then on 2nd and 10 of that same drive, Trace McSorley, he gets greedy. He thinks he's Rex Grossman. I don't know what's up with all the Bears references today. And he literally chucks it deep. And, like, if you watch the replay, like, the receiver for Penn State is not open. It's, like, so badly underthrown. Like Ryan Lewis, like, makes the easiest like, I remember seeing it in person, thinking it was a good interception. And I watched the replay. I was like, ooh, boy, that was a horrible pass. So Ryan Lewis makes this game-clinching interception. Like I said, it was a stupid throw, and it was 2nd and 10. McSorley didn't need to do that. He could have just checked it down again. I mean, if that was fourth down, you could see it. And it was just total overconfidence. The game was over at that point. Pitt takes a couple knees. So the fallout, the offense was really good. Peterman's stats were 3 touchdowns and only 1 interception. Henderson and Ordoff had these great games receiving. They each scored a touchdown. The running backs, like I said, they stole the show. Probably like the most underrated group in Pitt history. I mean, you have Connor, Ollison, Hall, Ashton, and then they even had that Jamar Parrish, who, I mean, he made a play here. He was more of a blocking guy. I mean, that's an unbelievable group, and 2 of those guys are in the NFL, so that's pretty good. Trace McSorley had the Penn State quarterback had this stupid TD celebration. Like after he would throw like a touchdown pass, he'd like do this like imaginary like baseball bat swing, like he just hit a home run. So I'm not sure if he did that after he threw the interception to Ryan Lewis. He was like, "Yeah, home run."
Maybe he like pretended to strike out.
Yeah, he walked back to the dugout disappointingly. Back to that quote about James Franklin. A year later, Franklin said they beat Pitt the next year. Beating Pitt was like beating Akron, downplaying the rivalry. And he was just mad because he had lost to them the year before. And, he was mad because Pitt had celebrated too much. It was like their Super Bowl. So, when you beat Penn State, you should just go, "I'm sorry, Coach Frank. I'm sorry we beat you. We'll never do it again for the next 3 years." Which they did. They didn't beat them again. This is Pitt's only win out of this 4-game little series. So
yeah, that's true.
And I think like I said, I think it shows that it really is a rivalry. That kind of, why would you go and say that a year later if you didn't think it was a rivalry?
Mm-hmm.
The annoying Penn State media, we kind of touched on them. Literally, first question out of the box was, what a great game by Connor. What a great play by Ryan Lewis. Boy, defense didn't look good. Oh, boy, Saquon Barkley is the best running back you've ever seen. It's like, who cares? It's like a freshman on a losing team, and this is the Pitt press conference. Go ask Franklin that question. It's just like the media just like worships Penn State in this town. This whatever. Franklin also got annoyed. Like Tony Dorsett, obviously, maybe had a few adult beverages that game because like they had interviewed him and he was really excited and happy. So after the game, he made sure when he was walking by, like Franklin, to yell like "Hail to Pitt" and stuff. So another they celebrated the Super Bowl. Well, Franklin, you've never won one, and Tony Dorsett has. So, oh well, that's enough trash talk, I guess. Going on that theme, nothing brings out the venom, as you can see, from Pitt fans as myself by playing Penn State. It's the most passionate, Pitt fans who were normally like kind of laid back and just resigned to our lot of life of going 6-6 to 8-4 every year and losing the Pinstripe Bowl. Fun story, like I was at this game, and there was these 2 ladies, this lady and her daughter, and she was probably like in her 30s, and her mother was obviously older, and it was me and my dad, and they were like the most just typical laid-back Pitt fans. They would come and enjoy the game, and they'd cheer every once, but nothing too crazy. Well, the lady's daughter, who was younger, was like sitting like right. No, sometimes she sat on the other. She was sitting right beside me, and and her mother wasn't there. Her husband was there, I think, and like the stuff that came out of this woman's mouth would make a sailor blush. I mean, oh my goodness! Like I remember literally at like one point, like halfway, I said, "Do you kiss your mother with that mouth?" I was like, "Holy cow!" Like, I mean, I'm normally the guy jumping up. I get pretty passionate. I normally jump talking trash on the officials or Kellen Winslow and getting Pitt players hurt. But be that as it may, like, boy, man, nothing. The Pitt fans just, and they see that Penn State uniform, man, all bets are off.
It ends up being a pretty devastating loss for Penn State because they actually win the Big Ten that year.
Yeah.
But they get left out of the college football playoff.
Yeah.
Had they won this game, I don't think they get left because the only other game they lost was to Michigan. It was like number 4 at the time.
Yeah.
So yeah. I think if they win this game, they're in the college football playoff that year.
So yeah, once again, we're the anti here.
Yes.
We're here to ruin your season.
Yes.
Pitt follows up by losing the next 3 games, and James Franklin can go back to looking down his nose and comparing Pitt to Akron. So good luck playing Akron and Temple. Moving on, the bigger game that year, and it's only bigger because it was a more higher ranked opponent, and they're had much more success at that point, was Clemson. Clemson had Deshaun Watson and Dabo Swinney and Wayne Gallman and I think Boulware on defense. They had a really good team. Mm-hmm. They were ranked second for a reason. They had won 46 straight games against unranked opponents over 5 seasons. I think they had won a bunch at home. They hadn't lost to an unranked team at home in years. So the best part is Clemson always seems to duck Pitt. Like they ducked them. They were supposed to play them when the Big East ACC settled. They were supposed to play as part of that settlement. And Clemson was like, no, we'll just pay the money and not play Pitt. Clemson rarely comes north. They don't like to come any further north, I guess, than Raleigh. But every other year they have to go to Boston, so I don't know. But that's really the only time Clemson comes north. The funny part is I actually predicted Pitt would win this game before the season started. I actually said, because I just knew. I was like, that's a game Clemson's probably going to lose. Pitt's going to win that somehow, some way. It's the most Pitt thing to do.
It is the most Pitt thing to do, but I got to say, I was definitely not in that same boat. I remember this game. We had friends over, and our kids were playing with their kids, and I just kind of had the game on, and I was kind of conversing with friends and with the kids, and then it was you kept coming back to the TV. It's this isn't a blowout yet. This still isn't a blowout yet. It was at Clemson. I mean, Clemson, do you want to talk about how good Clemson is or was? I mean, still is.
Yeah, they haven't lost. They had, I think that's the last home loss since then. Well, that was 2016.
Well, here, let's take it to another level. Since 2015, since the beginning of the 2015 season, they've lost 2 regular season games, period. Period.
Pitt's one of them.
Pitt's one of them. Yeah. 2017, they lost to Syracuse. That's it. So that's
the list.
At the time of this recording.
Maybe that's why they don't like playing teams from the north. They just lose for them.
that's 5 entire seasons plus however many games we are into the 2020 season. They've lost twice in 5.5 seasons. So that's how good Clemson is. Just to set the stage for what kind of historic level of upset this was.
Well, on another bit of history, Clemson was ranked second, so Pitt had that going for them.
Right. Pitt, you don't want to play Pitt when you're ranked number 2. We've talked about that in previous episodes.
And Pitt had just a couple years early beaten West Virginia when they were ranked number 2. Although West Virginia didn't quite have the pedigree that Clemson has.
Right.
Clemson that year kind of had they had a lot of close wins. They'd almost lost to NC State earlier in the year. They had to go to overtime to win that game, and I think the NC State kicker had missed some field goals that would have won the game or put it away. Onto the game, Pitt scores first by using a pass to Jamar Parrish. It's hey, Jamar Parrish sighting. George Ashton gets the score on a 15-yard shovel pass. There's that shovel pass, and this would become huge the whole game. And on Clemson's first drive of the game, Ryan Lewis gets a big interception in the end zone. That was a big play. But on the next offensive drive by Clemson, the offense responds. They have a big jump ball over Ryan Lewis. Yeah, their receivers were pretty good. And it set up a rushing touchdown by Wade Gallman. It was pretty good, I think. Then Pitt catches the Clemson defense napping again. They hit Connor for a touchdown. He was kind of out of the flat as a running back, and he just they weren't watching. He was Connor with a pass. Woo. On the next offensive series, there's this weird play where Wayne Gallman looked like he was stopped short, and then he kind of fumbled. It was I think it was a 4th down too, wasn't it? Or maybe it was 4th down, but it looked like he was stopped short and looked like he fumbled, and Jordan Whitehead picks up the ball and returns it all the way. But then it goes to replay, and the ACC remembers that Clemson is an old school ACC member, and they're playing at home, and that of course is going to be a touchdown for Clemson. So it's a 14-point swing. It was a big play in a game. Clemson takes the lead on a passing touchdown to Mike Williams, but then Pitt hangs in there. They make a nice Scott Orndorff, who had a great season, makes a nice catch for 54 yards. He kind of pushes off a little, but he just kind of outfights the defensive back. But then we get into poor Chris Blewett. He misses the extra point, and Clemson still leads 21-20. After the extra point miss, Narduzzi gives his kicker a pep talk and a kiss for some kind of Bill Raftery with the kiss.
It worked.
Yeah. Pitt goes for a 4th and goal at the Clemson 1-yard line. They get a passing touchdown to George Ashton. Clemson reclaims the lead on a passing TD to Ardavius Scott. Late in the half, Pitt has a chance to take the lead again because they're still down by 1 point due to the extra point miss. So they try a long field goal by Chris Blewett. The really weird part of this play is like Dabo Sweeney's trying to call timeout, and like the official doesn't see him or hear him, so he doesn't get the timeout. But it works out because Chris Blewett kicks the ball into the back of the offensive lineman. So kind of a break for Clemson there. But I don't know if Chris Blewett would have made the second attempt anyway. But so Pitt is down at the half by a point. Chris Blewett is like shaky at best. He's mixed an extra point and a field goal. So you're kind of like, late, come down to late field goal. Ugh. So the third quarter, Clemson scores twice, one on a pass and another on a short run by Wayne Gallman. But Pitt scores on another shovel pass. They run the shovel pass again and score at Orndorff. It was kind of like almost like the option. Like they would have the running back run to the side and they'd have Orndorff go up the middle. So it was almost like an option, but with the shovel pass. Clemson really had trouble with that play all day. The big play of the game comes as Clemson is up by 8 points and they're driving. And they have a 1st and goal. They convert a 3rd down. And they have a 1st and goal at the Pitt 3. And Deshaun Watson, he still kind of like in moments he'll throw an interception. He can make some big plays and win you some games, but there's just sometimes he just throws kind of like head scratching interceptions. And this is one of those cases. This really is what probably won the game for Pitt. Watson throws a pass and it's intercepted by linebacker Salim Brightwell. And it's really one of the biggest plays of that season, if not Pitt history. Brightwell returns the ball down to the Clemson side of the field. On 3rd and 10, Pitt does get a break from the officials. They call a questionable pass interference call. The Clemson fans weren't too bad. They weren't happy about it, but it wasn't that great. But you know what? Don't let James Conner stiff arm your defensive back and score a touchdown on the very next play. So, maybe tackle James Conner and, it's not an issue. But so, yeah, James Conner had a really good game that day. I remember Boulware said he had to change his face mask after early in the game. Conner hit him so hard he bent his face mask.
Oh, wow.
So James Conner's a man on a mission at this point. So on a 4th and 1, so they score a touchdown, and they don't get the 2-point conversion. So Clemson, I think, is still up by 2.
By 2.
2, yeah. And so Clemson gets the ball back, and the next big play, and the defense much maligned, is another one. The defense made some plays this game. They gave up a lot of points. They gave up some yards, but they got the interceptions. And this is another big play on a 4th and 1 at the Pitt 34-yard line with 1:02 left. Clemson's just going to hand the ball. Wayne Gallman's already had 3 short yardage touchdowns. Pitt hasn't been able to stop it pretty much all day. So they hand the ball to Gallman, and Avonte Maddox somehow gets outside and forces Gallman inside, and Galambos and I watched the replay and I couldn't tell who the defensive end was, but Galambos really cleaned up the mess. It was really Maddox and the defensive end who made the play, and Galambos made a nice tackle, and they stuffed him well short. Mm-hmm. So this is probably, outside of the interception by Brightwell, the second biggest defensive play of the game because, if Clemson gets the first down there, the game's over.
The game's over, right.
So now they're at their own 35 with only a field goal. They only need a field goal to win. Pitt drives the ball to the Clemson 31-yard line. There's a big catch by Orndorff again in there. And once again in college football, you can pass over the middle as long as you're getting 10 yards. As long as you're getting first downs, you can still, it's not as costly. The NFL, is not as much time runs off.
Right.
So Lord knows they trot out Chris Blewett for a 48-yard field goal. And I can't remember, did they freeze him? I think they did freeze him this time. Dabo did get his timeout. And it was a lot of hoping and praying going on, but Blewett knocks it up there and it goes through. It's not the most confidence-inspiring field goal, but it made it in between, and that's all that matters. And I just remember after that went through, because I was at work watching this. Like, if you watch the replay, James Conner's going, like, everybody calm down. Like, Ice is the same way. Because it was like, I've seen Pitt do this before. Somehow they screw this up.
Because there was
everybody hold on.
Yeah, because there was like
they
6
had the
seconds
kickoff,
left.
yeah.
There was like literally time for like a kickoff return. But yeah, you're right. It's Pitt. You never.
Yeah,
you never
like
wanna
James
get
Conner was
to-
literally on the side, like, because everybody's going nuts and you know hugging and everything. It is like, and James Conner's like, everybody calm down. I've been here too long.
That was such a cool moment for Blewett because they were going to lose because of that extra point. That's why they had to go for 2 on that touchdown.
Yeah.
Was because of what happened with the extra point. So like he was literally going to have cost them the game, and then he got a chance to redeem himself, and then he did.
So Pitt gets out of the kickoff without. It really wasn't even that dramatic. Clemson quarterback Deshaun Watson has 508 yards passing, but I'll say this: passing yards are probably the most overrated stat in the world. And he does throw 3 touchdowns, but what kills him is he throws 3 interceptions. And that one late in the game to Brightwell, that was first down, I think. Once again, it's like kind of like the McSorley. Like if you take a sack there, what does it matter? You know.
Right.
And so it was kind of head scratching. Gallman has 3 rushing touchdowns, but he didn't get that 4th down. Gallman had a great game. Peterman, this really is probably the game to put Peterman in the NFL. This makes him John Gruden's favorite quarterback. Peterman has a 5-touchdown, no interception game. That's in Clemson. That's pretty darn good. James Conner had a great game with 132 yards rushing and a touchdown. That one I was talking about where he mauled the Clemson player. The much maligned defense comes up with the big plays. The Clemson fans complained a little, but I don't remember hearing too much about it. I mean, outside of, that wasn't pass interference or we didn't get our timeout. I mean, there was enough calls that went against Pitt. I thought it all kind of evened out in the end.
Yeah, the interference call, you already said it was a bad call. But I mean, it happens. It wasn't like the game-deciding play. And certainly, like you said, the interception at the goal line, the 4th and 1, they had their chance. Even after they got stuffed on 4th and 1.
Well, plus Pitt got ripped on the first. That should have been a touch. You could have said that could have been a touchdown the other way for Pitt.
Right.
That was definitely.
They had their chances, and even after they got stuffed on 4th and 1, that was at the Pitt 34. They still could have stopped them from driving. So.
Yeah. So Pitt gets bowl eligible. They were still not bowl eligible at this point in the season. That's their 6th win, so they're bowl eligible. Yay, Penn State Bowl. It's the biggest upset in Pitt history outside of 13-9.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, again, winning at Clemson, like I said, they've lost 2 games in 6 years, and this was one of them, and it was at home. I mean, I don't, I think that the 13-9 is bigger because the whole season was on the line. The hopes and dreams of Morgantown, everybody's life like that. That's why that was a bigger upset. But this, in terms of like, and this Pitt team was better than the 07 team West Virginia. So that was another reason you can't put it in the same category. But this was pretty huge.
Some of the aftermath, the loss to Pitt would be Clemson's only loss of the year. So the only team that they lost to was Pitt, and they finished 14-1 and beat Alabama in the national championship, which I think Watson had a great game against the Nick Saban defense too. So you can't be too mad at the Pitt defense, for giving up all those yards. The Clemson loss did not derail their season for Clemson. It just made it a little more bumpy, but in the end, and they still made the national championship game. I mean, it just caused, some fans, some consternation for a week or two. In contrast to that, like we said, the Pitt loss totally derailed Penn State's season. That ruined, if they just would have lost to Michigan and not Pitt, or, whatever version of 1 losses, like you said, they would have won. So, no, I worry, that's okay. It's like beating Akron. So you lost to Akron. So, they were able to win the rest of their game. I remember that championship game that was against their good buddy Paul Christ. They came back, and But then they had to play a real team like USC, so then they lost to USC in the Rose Bowl because can I just express, like, I love USC football. They're my hit squad. Like, whenever somebody starts getting out of hand, like Notre Dame or Penn State or one of the SEC teams, I just get a call to, LA and say, hey, can you guys, like, take care of business for me? And USC never disappoints. How can you not like a team that beats Penn State, Notre Dame, and,
I remember when Penn State came back to beat Wisconsin, and the only thing I could think is, my God, Pitt beat two of the Power Five conference champions this year.
Like, it's an odd season for sure.
They beat two of the Power Five conference
and then
champions.
lost to North Carolina.
Yeah, right. Yeah, lost to Mitch and Ryan Switzer. Yep, if that's not a Pitt season, Steve, I don't know what is.
I said Pitt would play in the ACC championship game in 2008. They would face Clemson again, but they didn't have quite the team they had in 2016. Big stories, James Conner playing well after coming back from cancer. It just gave that team, I think, like a perseverance through because a lot of teams after that one loss to North Carolina might have really gone in the tank. Conner had a great season, 16 touchdowns and 1,000 yards rushing. Not as good as his 2014 season, but I mean, considering the knee injury and the cancer, I think I'll take that. I'll take that. He did get drafted by the Steelers after that year, yeah. Nathan Peterman really was the beneficiary, the biggest benefit, because I don't think he would have made the pros without this season.
Agreed.
He had a great year at quarterback. He got better the whole year. His stats were 2,855 yards passing and 27 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. Lamar Jackson, who was the Heisman winner that year, had 30 TDs passing and 9 interceptions, so they were pretty close passing, but Jackson had 21 rushing TDs. So that's probably why he got the Heisman, and Nathan Peterman wasn't even thought of in the same conversation.
No.
Not that, yeah. So just to kind of close the book on Peterman, I was thinking of this too, like, he's probably the most successful quarterback outside of Bill Stahl. Like, I mean, like if you're ranking like top 5 quarterbacks, even of Pitt all time, like he's got to be somewhere tied for 5th, right? I mean, I can't, like, he's definitely, I mean, I'd say he'd have a more successful career at Pitt than Palco.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, so you had Danny Marino, you had Alex Van Pelt.
Matt Cavanaugh, that's probably your 3 there, right?
But then everybody after that, I mean, Rod Rutherford, I mean, if Larry Fitzgerald's not playing, you don't put him in that list. I don't know, David Priestley, John Turman.
Yeah, that's not even close. Like Stahl's like, I think Stahl and Peterman are almost the same quarterback because like they played on this great where they didn't have to be the man. They didn't have Palco was always on teams where he had to drive the offense, and I would say that probably about Marino and Van Pelt too. But like Peterman was just he got complimented by that running game so well. And I don't know. And like I think Peterman is definitely he's definitely a solid 5. Like him and Stahl are probably like 5 tie,
Yeah, he was very good, and that season especially, he really came through, and that's what got him to the NFL, like you said.
Yeah, he's John Gruden's favorite backup. He's still QB with the Raiders as of this time. The running backs, Olsen, Hall, Ashton. What an unbelievable combination, Those guys, a couple of those guys in the NFL. I mean, I can't think of a better running back core in Pitt history. I mean, I know there was that way back when group, like from like the 20s, Orndorff was another guy. I don't think he's in there. I don't think he ever made the pros, but he was pretty good. He had a great season, a lot of big catches. Mm-hmm. Jester Weah developed nicely throughout the year. Henderson was the kick returner. I thought he was a very good kick returner. He had some big kick returns, but he was like the speed guy. Like they would do all that jet sweep motion, and when teams like Penn State did that, I noticed in the first half they just started stacking everybody inside to stop Conner. Well, it's almost like it's almost like the option. Okay, if you're going to sell out that much to stop the fullback, we're just going to run around you, and that killed teams too. Teams couldn't figure that out. The offense just had an amazing year. Matt Canada had that great scheme. I think it's like it really is the triple option running attack from a pro set, and that really. And then he marries it kind of a pro passing style game, and it's worked everywhere it's tried except for LSU, because LSU just didn't realize they didn't have James Conner, Quadra Ellison, Darren Hall, George Aston. I'm sorry, I don't know who was on that LSU team, but I'm sure those running backs were better than whoever they had. Matt Canada goes for the big payday at LSU. It doesn't work out for him. He gets fired after one season. He spends a horrible year at Maryland. He becomes the intern coach because the main coach got fired because in a practice one of their players died. Canada spends a whole year out of football. Nobody would hire him, which I figured was going to happen to him because that's kind of a big scandal. Somebody dying is not good on your resume.
Yeah.
But he kind of comes back into it. He's now an assistant coach for the Steelers. So
Right, and I was excited when the Steelers hired him to be the quarterback coach.
Yeah.
And
well, you can see the running game too. They're incorporating a lot.
Yes.
Yeah,
you can. Yeah.
Although they have two. That other guy from Maryland is one of guys he had in college, and Connor obviously.
Right, but I always thought he was a pretty smart coach, and it's weird that he was only there for one season at Pitt. You kind of forget that, don't you? Then,
well, I think I remember him because it was so short, and I thought it was kind of like at the time I thought I know Pitt's cheap and everything, but Narduzzi said they offered him over $1 million to stay, and I agree. People were trying to make something like Narduzzi he wasn't being mean to Canada. He just was talking to other coaches and said, be patient and you'll get your head coaching gig. Where let's say Canada stays at Pitt, gets 2 or 3 more years, and they have, even mediocre offenses or good offenses, he's a head coach somewhere. Somewhere he is a head coach.
Yeah,
and that's obviously his goal. That's what he wants to be.
Right, but I think LSU is obviously way bigger time college football than Pitt, and that's what he was thinking is, I can make my bones at LSU. It did, like you said, it did not work out well for him, and Narduzzi was probably right there. He should have just stayed, and then he would have been a hot coaching prospect at that point. And it just stinks. It stinks when a guy makes a decision like that, and then it doesn't work out for either side.
Yeah.
It's
and it actually got worse. Yeah, as it went on. Yeah.
Right.
So, because I remember reading articles people would dig him up he was living in the Outer Banks in North Carolina. No, nobody's calling me. I'm just kind of hanging out. I don't know if that was part of the settlement with LSU or what, but he spent a year out of football. Pat Narduzzi still hasn't won an ACC championship, but he did get Pitt to that championship game. And to go back to the quarterback thing, he really hasn't had a quarterback as good as Peterman.
Yeah, I mean Kenny Pickett's.
I think he's almost to
Yeah.
But once again, Pickett's in a different place. Pickett has to be the offense, whereas Peterman doesn't. If you put Pickett with those running backs,
Right. It would be a completely different story. Yeah. Yes.
Just the what ifs. What if Pitt could have beat North Carolina and Virginia Tech? Well, they probably would have won the Coastal, and they had to play Clemson again. Could they have beat Clemson twice in 1 year? I don't think you're going to catch Clemson napping twice in one season, so I don't know. At least they wouldn't have not been in Clemson. Maybe if Clemson would have been ranked number 2, that would have been kind of scary for them.
It would have been interesting to have had the chance.
Yeah. And like we said, such a stereotypical up and down season from the off-field stuff with James Conner, the Penn State disrespect, then beating 2 national championship contenders in Penn State and Clemson. It's just it's one of the more head-scratching seasons, and it's a fun season. It was a blast to watch, blast to live. I mean, as a Pitt fan, I enjoyed it. Ruining Penn State season, boy, we could have stopped in week 3 and it would have been all right in my book.
Yes, yeah. Like I said, what beating 2 of the Power 5 champions and then losing to Mitch Trubisky and Ryan Switzer. I can't. It's just Pitt. That's Pitt. That's Pitt. That's what you get being a fan of Pitt football, and you just take it, the good, bad, and the ugly.
Well, thanks for listening to our podcast. I hope you enjoyed our recap of the season, and check us out on the website, which is...
So the link to the website, the link to our Twitter, and the link to our Facebook page are all in the description of this podcast, so you can get the links there.
Nice, awesome. Well, thanks for listening. Tune us in next time for another great look back in Pittsburgh sports history.
Thank you.